And we're live!
Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to show you the Winsor & Newton watercolour markers. So what's a watercolour marker? These are great little tools, so brilliant for travel because you don't have to take wet paints with you, and they're pigmented. That's the main point about these, is they're pigmented, which means the colours are light fast. So other markers in different brands check that they've got light fast pigments in them, and then you can put them on the wall without any problems. If they're dye based, they tend to fade quite quickly because they're designed for illustration, which is then put into print. So light fast watercolour markers. So the watercolour medium in a marker. These ones are two-ended, so you've got a brush-like end and a much more fine end with the same colour in. And what I want to do is show you how these markers work. I'll do a demonstration, but also I've heard that some people say that they're not working as they should do. They don't move with the water. And a lot of that is actually not the marker, it's down to the surface that you use them on. It's been suggested that a cellulose paper like the practice paper or Bockingford is the best paper, and it has the most best effects and doesn't leave you with the stripy lines. So what I'm going to do is test different types of papers and have a look, because actually I find it works on papers which people have said doesn't always work on. So it's always test before you do anything. So I'm just going to do some quick swatches using both ends, because then you can see how they work. I will probably more than likely use the bigger end because I like to put a good amount of colour down. So even as I'm putting the colour on, I can feel the difference in the paper. The Saunders Waterford, which is 100% cotton paper and beautiful for watercolours, is grabbing the colour, is absorbing the colour a little bit, and it feels softer. So let's see what happens when I apply water. So this is cartridge paper. Working fine, it's not leaving stripes. It may do if I left it dry a little bit longer and it's been able to absorb into the paper. So just moving it around like you would do. That's left a little bit, but I'm still quite pleased with that. Once that's dried, we'll see. I think you can see what I mean by leaving lines behind, which sometimes I actually like to leave the lines behind, but other times you want a much more smoother blend. So onto the SAA practice paper. Now this is a cellulose paper, so it should move quite nicely, and you can feel the difference. You can feel the softness of the pigment moving on the surface. So again, see, I can't actually see hugely in this light. I think that's smooth. The light's directly on above it. So again, Saunders, and I have heard that Saunders or cotton papers aren't that good, but I've not found a big problem with it. So let's give it a good fair, and you can see it's blended in quite well. Same with the smaller marks. These are usually the ones that tend to have a little bit more of a problem. And again, a little bit of work. That may not be moving as well. Cellulose, so Bockingford. This is a cellular paper, and you can see actually how really easy that is to move that pigment. So try the papers, see what papers you've got and see how they work. So here, and that you can see actually that's really quickly moved the pigment and taken away a lot of the lines. So just trying it on copy paper, because this is the best example to show you how really it doesn't work on some papers. So there's no movement at all on here because the papers grip the colour. So give it another fair chance. I'm just going to take it off because it may go through. And you can see there, it's just not moving the pigments. And that is one end of the spectrum. Up to, you can see how it's worked on most of these. There's a little bit of lines on some of these. I'm finding Bockingford is probably the one I prefer, which is the one I'm going to be using now. So test papers, just check and test it on. So it's not going to be the pens that aren't working, it's just the mix of the paper and the pens that you're using. But you can see how lovely they blend out. So what I'm going to do now is do a small demonstration using the markers of the fuchsias. And as always, what I have done is I've tested out my colours. Like I would do with a watercolour, I've tested them out, put them swatches, moved them, and seen what mixes I can make. So here I've used some of this orange red, I'm sure it has a name, because what Winsor & Newton are very good at is calling their colours. This is a cadmium red hue, so you will find a cadmium red hue, the same colour in their watercolours, in their acrylics. They have their colour ranges all match throughout, which is a very useful thing. So this cadmium I've mixed with I think that must be an alizarin. Yep, and it's creating a nice colour. So again, I've just had a little play, see how they mix before I'm going on to the work. And I've got another piece of paper because I will do a little swatch before I put it on. So the first thing I want to do is, normally, I'm not interested in backgrounds, but I think if I just worked with the detail, it's going to just look really stark. So what I'm going to do is just do a bit of a wet in wet in the background, just to add a little bit of texture and colour and push forward the areas I'm working on. Now with this wet in wet, what I could do is I could drop my pen nib into it and see how it moves that way. But I'm not going to, because I'm a little concerned that constantly dropping your nib into the water will kind of affect the nib quality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it a different way. This is going to take a little... My water is a bit stained, which is not a problem because it's making it easier for me to see where I need to go. And I'll try and do this quite quickly because I don't need the whole area. I just want a touch of texture into the background and around. And it doesn't matter if I go over these leaves. So, as always, when I show you in this demonstration, I'm going to do it quite quickly, quite loosely, and I will talk about basically what I'm thinking about as I'm doing it. And some colour on there, drop into there. So, wash. I can't go round those little areas, so what I'll do is I'll just wash over them, and to be honest, by the time I get to them, hopefully the paper will be dry. I've put a lot of lines on here and I'm getting a little bit lost about where areas are, so sometimes I prefer to start with very few lines and then build up and decide on at a later date where things work or where they need to be balanced. So that looks fine to me. It's a good wash over the paper. So, like I said before, what you could do is you can just drop in and touch with your nib. I'm not going to. Just got a bit dry there. What I'm going to do is put some colour onto a china palette, and then I can just use my brush and take the colour from there. And then this will add to the longevity of my pen. It means I'm not actually affecting see there, now that's really simply an easy background. It's going to look quite effective, and all I've done is wet it, and it's the water and the pigment are doing the job for me, which is always a good thing to do. So, just a bit more colour, green, just drop it in. Let it move. It's got a bit dry over here. See if I can soften and move a little bit. Okay. So very much just like a watercolour, moves, blends into the, so what colour now? I think I might do a bit of darker blue just to add a little bit of darkness. And again, onto my palette and use it as you would do a pigment. Got a bit too dry at the top. Not overly worried about where the colour's going to go. I tend to find that sometimes it just works itself out. That's what I like about watercolour. It works itself out a lot of the time. If I don't overwork, if I just let it do the creative bit for me, I want to add a bit more of the pink in the background. So again, onto the palette and just drop some hints of other fuchsias in the background. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, so I need to let that dry now. So while I'm drying that off, we'll have a short break and I'll come back and then I can work another way using the markers for more detail. So join me in a minute.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing about being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I could shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
Hello and welcome back. So I've had a chance to dry that. Use the hairdryer as you can do with any watercolour. It's pretty dry. So now I can use the pens the way probably most people will try to use them. So I want to look at just using the fine area. And all I'm going to do is I'm putting pigment down because I'm going to be quite careful about not putting too much on because it moves quite a way. And you'll see I'm not outlining the whole colour, the whole fuchsia with the one colour, because I do know that this pigment will move, and I also want to blend a little bit. Because the cut, if you notice at the top of the fuchsia or toward, there's a darker area at the top, so again I want to show that difference. I know the picture I've got is portrait, but I can't paint portrait, so I have to change everything to being a more landscape colour. Right, I'll come back to those. So I'm just going to go for a smaller brush because you can see how much this pigment moves, but I've just thought about maybe I'll make sure I change my colour. And you can see it's not a difficult thing, I'm just putting colour on and I'm going to be filling in areas, so I'm not being precise, I'm only thinking about where the colour could be. And if you look on the fuchsia, picture of the fuchsia, it's quite a lot of light, so I'm going to be quite careful. So now I'm moving the pigment around. Once it's dried, and if I feel I need more, I can go back into it. But just make sure my brush is wet, and I can. No, I think I'm using too small a brush. I'm always talking to people about using a bigger brush. It makes life so much easier. The bigger brush, it's much easier to work. And you can see there, I'm feeling it's much easier to work with the bigger brush. So, first layer, I can see it's not strong enough. So what I'll do is I'll come back into it. But I wanted to retain some of the lightness by not putting too much pigment on. Let's blend. Okay. So while that's drying, because I think I do need a little bit more colour on there, a little darker, more of the alizarin. I'm just going to work on this because I like strong colours. When I'm working, I like strong colours. Sometimes the softer colours I just need to work on a little bit more. But I think at the moment you can see it is quite effective. What I'm trying to get rid of are these outline, just bringing the pigment into the white areas. Okay. Move it around. Once the pigment's got wet, it's much easier. You can see there, it's starting to blend. This area isn't, it's still got the stripes of where I put it down. But if I go back into it, that's why I tend to jump around, because by jumping around, I'm leaving that area. And then I can look back and go back into it rather than keep working on it until I feel it's okay. I'd rather move away from it and then just come back to it later. And that just helps with some of the judgments I make. Okay. Right. So leave that, go on to the purple. Because for me, the darker areas are going to be these bits underneath. So if I can get those darker areas on, I know that how much more light I need to put on to the top of the fuchsia. And again, this is quite a strong moving colour. I don't want to put too much down. But the darkness is under here. Let's see how that works. Again, I'm going back to my big brush because I'm sure it's fine. Look at that lovely purple colour. You can see how it tones out. There we go, right under the lip of the fuchsia. If I feel there's too much colour, I can come back and tone it out a little bit more. It's just water. So if you were travelling, I'm using a brush and a pot in the studio. I like the process of dipping my brush in. It's just part of the process. But if you're travelling, these pens are great to take because they finish like a watercolour, but you've not got the problem of taking the paints abroad, the tubes of paint, the wet paints. And you can take a little water brush, which is you can fill with water really easily when you're out and about. So great for studio work as well as out and about. So I can see that needs to be darker, but I'm going to leave it for a minute. So you can keep working on this and keep it very watercolour like, but I want to try something else. I want to see what it's like if I just use the marker as a marker and actually feel and see some of the qualities of the marker. So I'm using the bigger end. I don't want to take away because that's got quite a bit of light on the top of that. I missed out the dark, there's a darker one here. I can see it on the picture. It's easily put back on. The outline there is dark. And this needs to be quite a slightly different colour to the more orange body fuchsia. Let's try that. That's nice there. I mean, I can easily tone these out if I'm not enjoying them, but I quite like the mix of the watercolour feel, but the marker feel as well. Just trying to see the full potential of the marker as opposed to just a watercolour. What I will do is I can see I've lost some of the light that maybe I was aiming for, but what I can do is see if I can lift off. So see if some of these colours will lift off the same way as a watercolour would. Keep missing that bit. And this bit is going to be definitely darker. I'm liking that much better now. I must also remember to keep putting things back so I can find them. I'm a messy worker, tend to have things all over the place. Okay, let's see if I can soften those a little bit. That's much, for me, that's much stronger. It's much more depth in that colour, and that's what I was aiming for. But I actually like the marks it's made, so I'm just kneading them off, tidying them off a bit to get the roundness and not the very loose marks I've left. I'm not overly going to work this because I quite like the marks it's made. Okay, so for me that's fine. I'm going to just work on, I can see from the picture that the darkness is here, just to show that this bit of the flower is behind. I need to add some darkness behind. So for me, this is actually quite a soft way of working. I'd normally go in a lot stronger, but I'm purposely trying something different. Again, this will be darker here. So I'm going to move this cut down a little bit, but not lose the colour. Okay. And it has texture. Okay, so that's working nicely. Just finish off these bits, and again I'll probably just do it with the colour, and I might add a little bit of water on. How easy is that than having to control a brush? Again, I'm putting the pigment on because I can just wash a brush over it, and you'll get the sense of it being a watercolour as well. So just make sure these fix to the rest of the plant. Working loosely, I'm not overly concerned with really fine detail. But you could spend a lot more time and really work and layer and build up your detail if that's what you enjoy doing. But you'll just sit watching me do it for ages, and I don't think that's useful for you. So, right, looks like I'm ready for the green. So again, using a couple of colours of green, and it can be quite simple. I can put some dark on, a little bit of the light, and mix them. to varying tones I'm going to do. So I'm going to start with, because they're quite a dark green colour, so of it, the thing about you being the artist is nobody's seen what you've got you're working from, so you can leave leaf out or change the shape or put them in different places. That's totally your decision, as long as you can see what you were trying to achieve. Okay, I know that bit is a different colour. Okay. So, and I'm sure this will work quite quickly once I've put this. Again, I've lost which leaves are which on here. Little one there. I want to put some more red because these are got red in here, and I know this area is red. Oh, couple of leaves there, not filled out. Okay, now some of the lighter. I'm going to use the brush end. I do find the brush end gives you a lot more covering power quite quickly. Okay, so what I'm actually just doing is putting pigment down, and then I'll move it with the brush. A lot of it is reviewing and reworking. Okay, there we go. Straight in with the... So at the moment that looks like a bit of a mess, but just adding water, you can now control... A bit more water because I need to lighten it. And just move and shape the leaves. Now, like I say, you can, especially on this cellulose paper, I can lighten and I can get rid of some of these lines. But to be honest, for me, I quite like that effect. It feels like you've brought the pigment in. Sharpen. Leaves have got quite a nice sharp edge, so let's try and... And there's the magic of water. How it can really bring something to life just by adding water. And I want to move quite quickly because this is going to... It's not something you want to just watch me doing, but you can see how effective that is. So now I want to make sure I've left some quite light areas. So I could work and move that pigment more, but I'm not going to. I like that effect it's leaving. So I'm glad I put the background on in that kind of wet wash, because I think that's just helped with bringing the work together. So think about this, you know, you can be out on location doing a landscape or just sitting at a cafe watching the world go by. And what I'm going to do with this, I'll just change the shape. I'm just going to add a little bit more because I feel they just seem to be floating at the moment. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more texture down here. And constantly I'm just thinking, you know, that doesn't look right, what can I do? Well, let's just see what I can do. What can I do on my brush? Because this is not going to be my final piece of work, my perfect piece of work. This is a study. This is let's see what the materials do. And I'm not overly worried about, I'm a little freer to experiment, to try things. And I think this happens with a lot of work, and this is when actually you can do a really lovely piece of work if you just lose some of the, no, I really have these standards I want to set for it. If you just kind of go, okay, this isn't working as much, let's see what happens. I mean, I know with commissions and things like that, you have to kind of get things a little bit more precise. But how do you get to those commission stages without trying or playing or just saying, well, actually, let's just see what happens. Okay. So I'm just softening off because they do look like they've got a nice thick line, so a bit too cartoony for me. But again, I'm not overly concerned. I want to just try and keep the light on this one. So if you do more precise work on some leaves and less on others, I think they will all blend into, you know, it will just enhance the characteristics of the painting. So again, a lot more water. And you can see how strong this pigment actually is because I'm trying to soften and keep it quite wet. So the last few leaves, just dab off my brush and see if I can really keep it very wet. Quite like that contamination I've got on my brush. I'll just use it, bring out a little bit of depth. And again, just thinking about it, constantly reviewing, but as you're dotting around the work, you're just reviewing and looking back and just making it work as a whole. Nearly done. So, like I say, I'm not working very precise. I'm bit loose, bit soft, and I've probably lost myself a little bit on some of the leaves. But look how effective that's worked. I think that's worked really nicely. And that's because I've left it. I didn't like it when I left it, but the beautiful thing about a lot of these pigments is, or the characteristics of some of these materials, is they do a lot themselves. Leave them be, let them dry, then go back and have a look and see what you need to correct, because a lot of the time you find that you probably don't. So a little bit needs to be sharpened off here, but I can think about that another time. So I hope you get the idea of what you can do with these markers. So great for travel, pigmented markers, so they're light fast now, and you can have fun. So I hope you give that a go and join me later in the week for another live demonstration.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing of being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.